Our Constitution is a document that's a very, very important document, and when you have, such an important document as our tribe does, it tends to weaken the tribal government if you're amending parts of it, because as we go through and so you've really got to study it, you've got to know it, you've got to know how it affects it, and you have to know the purpose of it. And so I think as our tribe, as our tribe ages, as new people come in, I think it's important for them to really understand, what it is their responsibility is as tribal members, and to continue to use it on that basis. And so that's why I think it needs to be a continuing education program, and good for the college since we have it here. Well, first of all, I've had just the utmost opportunity and time to have worked with this tribe and in this community, which is my community as well, but to be able to work with tribal members who were so sincere and so dedicated and so wanting to save their land, that all the effort and hard work that we did paid off. It paid off, and we had people at the time, the Restoration Committee, the Drums movement, they did it out of the love for their land and their tribe. And so that makes a huge, huge difference. I learned and I met so many people, and I learned from them how much they loved their land. I didn't need more work, of course, because at that time I had 7 children and I had a full-time job teaching. And so I didn't need any more work, except that they needed to do something. They wanted something done, and they wanted to save the land. And had we not done it, we wouldn't be here today. And so when, and again, at the drafting of the Constitution, it wasn't just the Restoration Committee, as so many say did it. It was the people in general. And as they began to work with us, as we began to work with them, they were able to tell us what they wanted in the document, how they wanted it, and why they wanted it. And I've learned to respect, and I can name a few as to how much their interest and their desire and their dedication moved me to continue, to do the work that I did. And so we had another one of the documents that I think needs to be really looked at, examined, and used by the tribal legislature is the Menominee Restoration Act itself. I find that there are many people who don't refer to the act, and the Restoration Act is what really restored the tribe, but it did more than that. It created a pathway to Congress that no other tribes have. It was an act, it is an act that just specifically talks and deals with the Menominee tribe. So, you need to look at that. It's set up also, Congress, because of the Termination Act, and because of the desire for the Menominees to be restored, and we were the first tribe to be restored, that was an important first, for the nation. So use that, look at that, and it outlined then how our Constitution was to be developed, the timelines for setting up the interim governing body and allowing the Menominee tribe to become, as much of a self-governing tribe as possible. So we just were not able to go out and do what we wanted to do. We had schedules and deadlines that we needed to meet. And one of them was that we needed to work freely and openly with the tribal members to make certain that in drafting our Constitution. And so we had a group of Menominees who volunteered and who did work on a committee that learned and went out into the homes, who went into the many communities, because our tribe was located in many communities, so we went to those communities to hold meetings. We also had the opportunity, first of all, to work with the Native American Rights Fund. And this is something interesting too that most people don't know. In order for a tribe to vet the Native Americans Rights Fund, NARF, to work with a tribe, they needed to have the request made by a senator of the United States. And Ada Deer, who happened to know and was working with in our lobbying to get people on board, our Congress on board to help with the act, to get it past the Restoration Act, went to Senator Edward Kennedy and asked him to make the request. And so he did. He made the request to NARF, and that is how NARF worked with the Menominees to draft the Restoration Act. And also we had then Yvonne Knight, who worked, her focus in her career was in developing constitutions, tribal constitutions. And so she then worked with us through that whole process to develop and draft the Menominee Constitution. We had many, many constitutions that we looked at. We just didn't take one, and we just had and looked at that to be able to get from that their constitutions what would make the best constitution and the strongest constitution for the Menominee tribe to give it the most power of self-governance. Because we wanted restoration, we wanted the protection, we wanted to go back under the trust status of the Bureau and the federal government, but we didn't want the domination that they had. So we wanted to be able to have our tribe operate on its own, but yet have the protection of our tribe and of protection, so that mostly the land would not be sold, and that we also, that was the dominant feature, I think, in the whole movement, that the land would not be sold. So another thing, you know, at that time, the Termination Act, Menominees thought the land would not be sold for 20 years. But then I know recently, not too long ago, Lisa asked me, how did the lakes, what happened to the lakes? How did they get sold? Well, during that whole termination plan, and we had a complex and complicated termination plan, which consisted of 3 trusts. And so part of that was they could lease the land, and Menominees were not, were not as well educated at that time, and really were beholding to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Secretary. And so if you said you were leasing the land, that meant you still owned the land until these 40-year leases that were given to the people that lived on the lakes. Well, those were in fact actually a deed, so that if the lessee paid for their lease at the time their lease was paid up, they then got the title to that land. So, you know, I thought this land was all being leased and it was still Menominee land, when in fact it was a 40-year lease, which was a land contract. So you go out, you can buy land now on a land contract. We found that out, that was the process when Drums finally got control of the voting trust and decided we were not going to we were going to then stop the lease and not give the people the land. Well, under state law, we didn't have any choice. Once they signed the lease, the land, and they paid the lease of the land, they got the deed to that property. So those are some of the things that I think, when you look at our Constitution, you'll see that we have a lot of restrictions on land sales and leases and types. And that's because of the complications and the complicated documents that termination created. And so it's so important for people to understand that and know what it is and follow that Constitution to be able to see when you affect one part, how else is it going to be affected. I think there's another part that I'd like to show, and it was Jerry Greeno. I have the utmost respect for him. He was on the Restoration Committee. He was on the old General Council. He was involved, many times, many years on the tribal legislature. I believe he was the one. If we've got a lot of restrictions on the tribal legislature from operating in executive session, and I'm almost certain it came from him that was one of his requirements or his suggestions that we put in, because he said many, many times to me that things were done in executive session. I wish I could have told people what was going on, but because they were in executive session, I couldn't. And so, and this was primarily through the land sales and through termination, and so I'm sure, if you need to watch, you need to make sure that he didn't want things snuck through in a meeting and in executive session so that the tribe wouldn't know about it. He wanted the tribe to be aware of all of this. So, when you talk about knowing what's in that Constitution, it's got to be concerning when people want to amend one and not know how it's going to affect other parts of it. So I think, it's important to know that a lot of the work in that Constitution come from a lot of Menominee people. And I've been asked several times about whether it should be amended or not. And, I don't have any one way or another. All I know is they were put there for a reason. I tell them they need to go back and look at the history. We had many meetings with people. Their input was there. We need to know why. And, our elders were really, really wise. They knew what they wanted. And you also know, and it still exists, people don't like to talk in public, but they'll talk in smaller groups. So, it's important to know why those things were there and just don't arbitrarily change things without affecting the entire document.
If you want to refer to the Constitution, you can bring it up on the screen.
Yes, they were. Well, I'm going to say there are things I talked to them through quite a bit of this, but I think the other thing that I think the Menominee tribe accepted the Indian Reorganization Act. I think Patty might be will talk a little bit about it, but the Indian Reorganization Act was passed in 1934. Although the Menominee tribe prior to termination did not operate, their constitution was not an IRA constitution, but they accepted it in October, I believe, of 1934, which then led the way for, after Restoration, for the Menominees to adopt a constitution, an IRA constitution, allowing them a lot of self-governing controls. And, you know, we could go into, you know, the benefits, and we did that. One of the requirements that Congress had was to require the Restoration Committee to send information out on a summary of the different articles of the Constitution, and we did that to vote on them. They also then set the requirements of voting, which was we needed to use the base roll, which was, there were over 3,000 Menominees, and the IRA required 30% of the people to participate, to cast, you know, the ballot, and 50% or 51% had to vote yes. So that's a high requirement. That's over 1,000 voters for, you know, the tribe, and for, you know, Indian people and Menominees didn't vote that much. When you look at 197 voted for termination, and when we had to have over 1,000 participating, that's quite a high number. And you look at, you know, our regional, our county elections, how many actually vote. So when you're talking about 30% and over 1,000 votes, that was a hard job to get that done, but that's what we had to use. Talked about the sentiment of the people, and I think that was the biggest thing. That the other thing that the people didn't want, as we drafted the Constitution, they didn't want to be represented by in districts. And prior to Restoration, people were voted in the districts, much like the county is now, but they wanted the 9 members to represent all of the whole tribe, and that's, so you have that, you have 9 members, and you have them representing all the people and not specific districts. They also didn't want a chairman elected because they did not feel that they wanted a popularity contest. They were interested in getting and electing people that were qualified to carry on and keep the tribe moving forward. We had the 20 years, you know, that we were without a tribe. And so, of course, we all know that Restoration hurt the tribe in many ways, and we still haven't caught up. And it's going to take years to catch up yet from the disastrous effect that termination had. And so what they wanted is not people that were popular, but people that could do the job. And I think if you look at the preamble of the Constitution, I got it, I can read it, but I thought it would be better if we could put it up and you could see it. Yeah, I can tell you what it says, but that's way in the beginning. It would be the opening statement. Let me read it to you. We, the members of the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin, being a sovereign nation, in order to organize for the common good, to govern ourselves under our own laws and customs, to maintain and foster our tribal culture, to protect our homeland, and to conserve and develop its natural resources, and to ensure our rights guaranteed by treaty with the federal government, do establish and adopt the following articles and bylaws of the Constitution and bylaws for the government, protection, and common welfare of the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin and its members. So when you take and you're running for office, you're voting, and you're concerned about the tribe, not yourself, not your families, or not your friends. You know, and you don't use that office to pay back, you know, for what somebody might do for you, but you've got to be really unbiased, and even if you don't like the person, if they're entitled to help, you give them help. And so, you know, that's kind of the way it is, and that's the intent. It's got to be for the welfare of the tribe. So when you look at people, see how they act. Are they paying back someone for something that they gave them? Maybe they helped them get on the legislature, or maybe they helped them get into office, and so they're paying them back, or are they really working for the tribe? You know, that sort of thing. And when you take your oath of office, that's exactly what it is. And so as you take your oath of office, you can't really fulfill the Constitution and uphold it if you don't know it. So you need to know it and learn it and do it. And so it's not an easy job, it's, you know, to do it, and it takes effort. So that's, you know, the other thing that I think was the intent of the tribal people when they adopted the Constitution. That's what they expected, and that's what we still must know. So we get into, you know, how this referendum is going to affect the Constitution. Well, you have to look at, when I said they wanted all 9 members to be representative of all the people, then if we look at Article 3, I think it is, which sets up I'm going to get my Constitution. Article 3 which sets forth the powers of the tribal legislature. And I think I gotta be rude, but I'm reading through the law. It says here that sets forth your powers of the Constitution. The tribal legislature, as established in Article 4 of this Constitution, shall be vested with all executive and legislative powers of the tribe, including the power, and it goes on. But think of that. We're concerned about who is going to be the chairman or who is going to be the officers. Well, we've got 3 branches of government, but your tribal legislature under Article 3 holds together, not 1, not 2, not 3. They hold 2, all of them, the executive branch and the legislative branch, is your 9 members of the of the tribal legislature, not the chairman, not the officers. So when we believe or superimpose that we have an executive committee, it doesn't say we have that. You also have to look at that Constitution on the end. It says that however, the tribal legislature shall exercise its power consistent with the limitations imposed by this Constitution and bylaws. That means that our tribe decided, and the people that drafted it did not give all the powers to the tribal legislature. They retained powers onto themselves. So again, our tribal members need to understand what the Constitution is. Because I know when I went out many times to talk to people or to work with them on the Constitution, I said, this is your document and your protection against yourself. It'll save you, it'll protect you as long as you know it and you insist that it's used. It's going to protect you even against me. I wouldn't be able to try to get something across. You know, as long as people know what their rights are and what they expect of their leaders, that is what should be done. You gotta challenge them. You know, and a lot of people don't like to challenge. and it's not an easy job. But do you want your rights or don't you? Do you want to save your land or don't you? Do you want to be here as a tribe or don't you? All you can do is remember what happened at termination. And had we fought against that, we wouldn't have had the 20 years, without it. So it needs to be, get educated. This is yours for your children. People have saved this for us, but it can be gone if you're not going to take care of it. And let's see, when Congress also, when they passed, it wasn't easy to get it passed, but they wanted to make sure that this is what the Menominee tribe wanted. And that's why they imposed, the hard restrictions, and they made us work to get there. So if we want it, we need to keep it, and we need to work at it. So we, sent the summary out so that people would understand as much as possible, and it is, a document that needs to be looked at, needs to be referred to, it needs to be studied. It's not that, but it's so needed. The powers of by having a chairman that's elected by the people is not going to give that chairman any more powers. So I quite don't understand why it is. I don't see any difference it's going to create. If they think they're going to have more powers, they're not, because then you have to go through the Constitution and change different parts of the Constitution. And then you're altering, the whole document. And then are you sure it's going to be as strong as it should be to provide the protection you're getting or not? And you look at the bylaws of our tribe. The bylaws are what sets forth the powers and how the committee can act, the legislature can act. And it's not going to change. You're going to have to be changing the terms. It's set forth in there, so I think it's going to be a huger job than even people. It's not just changing or electing the chairman. It changes many facets of your Constitution as you look through the different documents. So, but I can't see how it's going to create an executive branch. I guess I just don't know what it is that they want to accomplish. And so if it is, and I don't know why that wasn't looked at before they put it out for a referendum, and maybe Lori can tell us that. I don't know. But you're also going to run into, there's another section that people wanted, and maybe people don't understand why they wanted a restriction on residency, that the chairman needs to be a resident of the reservation. And the reason that was is because we have people so living all over, they felt that if people were interested in being the chair, they needed to live here on the reservation among them, and that was a requirement. So now, is the change going to, that if the change goes through and they elect it, is there going to be that requirement, or are they going to allow someone who doesn't live here, to be their chair? And that's also the reason for the residency requirements of 7, so that 7 legislators needed to live on the reservation at least. And the only reason they opened that up, that was debated, because they felt if you're going to control the tribe and you want to govern the tribe, then live amongst the tribe is what the general feeling was. And so, but then because there are so many living off, they thought they'd give them at least 2 representatives. And there was some resistance. They didn't want that as well. But they opened that up so that only 2 non-residents can be on at any one time. So if there's, if there's two in a that means, and their terms are not up yet, you don't have another chance. Just two at the time can be on. Again, I don't have any, I don't care if people vote yes, or I don't care if people vote no. I just think you need to understand what it is you're going to do with, how you're dealing with the document, and what effect it's going to have on the tribe, and its ability to government, and its ability to maintain. And I think, is this going to be in the best interest of the tribe, or are we looking for something else? So, that's another question you need to ask. I think, what we need to do now really is ask ourselves, of our tribal members, our tribal legislatures, are they working for the tribe, or are they working for themselves? And I think, they put themselves up to be questioned, and I think, their actions should be looked at. And that's what you do when you run for office. That's what you need to do. You need to work for the tribe. And it might be difficult, or it is difficult, because you can't please everybody. But I think in your own heart you need to know what it is you're doing. And I think that's basically, I could say some more.
That was pretty good. I mean, to just kind of speak about the issue with minimal notes. I mean, I always admired people that could do that.